Gamescom. So we had the Gamescom opening night, and it's kind of interesting, right? So Gamescom, just generally, and for a bit of context for people, because for me, Gamescom, I'd always heard of it, but I never really thought too much about it. And they always like to say themselves that they're the biggest game show in the world. And, if you look at it from an expo perspective and the amount of people that come in, it's definitely number one. But I don't think anyone could argue that E3 isn't the biggest games expo per year. But Gamescom's right up there. It's probably the second biggest, and it's certainly the biggest in Europe. And it's not been around for that long, actually. It's 2009. I thought it was around for a lot longer. And really, like, this year it was quite interesting because E3, they decided to really not, push very hard into an E3 online experience, and it was all a bit convoluted. And I think that was a big strategy error versus Gamescom, where they're like, okay, we're going to run it over that 4 days. And then Geoff Keighly got involved, as he does, in these kind of productions. And, I thought the production was interesting. We'll probably chat about it, during the segment. And, there was a lot of pump up about this opening night. And it was even referenced in the video and at the start of it. And can I just say, sweetie, so I didn't watch it live. It was like 3 a.m. in Australia. But I went on, because, I'm very fastidious. So I went on the proper Gamescom YouTube channel to watch the video. Have you seen that version of Gamescom, the video that they published?
No, are you talking about it had like the 30-minute pre-show stuff and all that,
Yeah,
or
so
is
it
it
had
like
all
a
of
big
that.
7-hour video or something?
No, it's similar to the IGN one that you linked. It's pretty much exactly the same, but the one difference is the audio stutters almost all the way through the whole video.
Okay.
So I started watching it and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with my computer? Like, oh my God. And then I switched to my iPad and it didn't work either. And then, of course, you go to the YouTube comments and I think it was like world premiere stuttercom or something like that. And everyone's just like saying, oh my God, it's stuttering. So I didn't even know that there was a proper version of this until you sent through this IGN link. I just went, oh my God, this is like a disaster. But I think it was like most people would watch it live or on Twitch or, other outlets that published it. So, yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. And we'll run through some of the big games. So, although, yes, some of these have been announced, but Call of Duty, Black Ops, Cold War, confirmed PC, current gen, next gen, and then we have the date for it, which is 13th of November, which also is like super interesting, right? Because that puts it right into the hitting zone of when the PS5 and the Xbox Series X is likely to come out. I mean, with at least in the case of the Xbox Series X, we know it's November this year. And I don't know if you've seen the news, but it seems like Microsoft is actually already backgrounding to some publishers and games companies to sort of, and retailers, hey, get ready for the first week of November. So it really does feel like that first 2 weeks is likely when it will come out. And this game, developed by Treyarch and Raven Software, seems it's been confirmed, right, that it's the direct sequel to Black Ops number 1.
Yeah, so the Black Ops 1 was a huge hit and very critically acclaimed at the time, and took a very interesting narrative, I guess, perspective on, the Cold War, of course, is a very interesting time in recent history, and they had kind of led into a lot of things that they moved away from in the future Black Ops games, where they started to get to more future tech and drones and everything. So I think a lot of people are very happy that they're actually going back to this and they're continuing on what they'd set up all the way back then in Black Ops 1.
Yeah. And for me, in terms of Call of Duty, and it's funny because I always hear people say, why don't they just call it Black Ops, instead of Call of Duty Black Ops, and then, further subtitle. But for me, it's like, I don't know, I don't necessarily just go, oh, Black Ops, Call of Duty. Like, I actually think from a marketing point of view, for people like me who are not super interested in the franchise, it actually does help ground it, like what it's all about. And then the other thing we know is that this will be $70 for next gen, which is similar to EA's. Is it EA's NBA 2K21?
It's 2K.
2K, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of interesting what's happening around this $70 price point. and it will be cross-generational. And then we've also heard that Hitman 3, that's coming out early next year, Epic Games Store exclusive on PC, but on current gen and next gen, but it'll have a free upgrade to next gen. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's similar to the last generation where there was a few different strategies that, publishers had.
And I just want to clarify, so that $70 version, that's the only version that's cross-generational. There is a cheaper version that will be available for Xbox One and PS4 that won't get you that upgrade, which I
But
believe that's 60 US. So essentially that $10 US gets you the game on both platforms.
so I might be wrong. I think I read that you can pay $10 to
Correct.
upgrade.
Yeah, so that's you can also do that as well.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Which is definitely what happened in the last generation. That there was a couple of games that they were like, pay ten
Yeah.
bucks and then you get it. Which I think that's fine. I know that I'm way more pro business on these kind of things, and people hate that, but like, I find that that's okay if they say, hey, it's an extra $10, and you can move your copy from the PS4 to the PS5. I don't really see a big deal with that. It's not a PC
Yeah.
consoles. Like, I
I
just think the expectations wrong when it comes to those
I
things.
I definitely don't have a problem with it, but I'm also a complete sucker, and I will just rebuy games. Like that, one of my games that I'm looking
Yeah,
forward to
Breath of the
most.
Wild.
Yeah, one of my games that I'm looking forward to the most is just the remaster of Kingdom of Amalur's coming out next month, and it was like $60. I'm like, yep, I'm buying that. I've already played through that game twice, but I'm just a sucker because I just want to play through it again. But I also understand why people would be frustrated because the shift in the industry is towards things essentially being compatible on both, and Xbox's smart delivery. So it's an interesting time for publishers. I'd say publishers more than developers about this because they're the ones making these decisions generally. Um, to kind of to really manage that,
Yeah.
and we've seen a bad way to manage that, like Control and 505 Games and Remedy. And then I think you've got people that they've got enough sway, like Activision, to probably pull it off. It's going to piss people off, but I think, as you said, $10 extra to get it on both platforms is not a huge ask. However, the fact that that may then segue into $70 becoming the norm, for US $70 US, I should say, which almost puts it in line with what Call of Duty would be over here in Australia for a new release. So I'm interested to see if that then means that
Yeah.
it's going to be 110 to 120 for these, for Australian new releases like this.
Yeah. And for people who are in the States listening to this, because in the States it generally is like $59 for all the games. Like, there is variability, but compared to Australia, the games, depending on what's happening with the retailers, the currency, like, I find that the games can be really wildly differently priced.
Definitely, like a new release, generally speaking, probably $80 here. But then you've got games like Call of Duty, which will be sometimes 90 to 100. So
But then also, like, can be a lot cheaper. Like, it seems, for whatever reason, in the States, the competition or whatever, it's sort of flattened out where everyone's just gone, you know what, like, the optimal price point is 59 or $60 and maybe $70 in the next gen. But here, you still get, like, our local version of Walmart, like a Big W or a Target or those kind of stores coming in with a crazy offer to get people in the store. And you're right. Like, I think, putting a business hat on, they'll definitely use this as an opportunity to try to bump up the average price of these games. So I feel like we're going to go back to the 90s, really, when games were like $100 in Australia. And it was pretty crazy, really.
I have less of an issue with the latest Call of Duty doing it than I do the yearly NBA 2K game.
Or
Simply
FIFA.
because simply because with this game, not that all Call of Duty games in recent memory have had campaigns, but this obviously has a full campaign, as well as the multiplayer offering. Whereas NBA 2K, while they have flirted around with story modes, of course, they are very much iterational a lot more than is that even a word, iterational? Anyway, it is now.
Iterative.
Iterative. I like iterational. I'm going to coin that. So yeah, like compared to Call of Duty, I think that the experience you're going to get across those games year to year, especially to the previous year, is going to be a lot closer than the Call of Duty games, in my opinion.
Yeah. And just to, illustrate it to people who aren't in Australia, for instance, a game like Ghost of Tsushima, it retailed from, and this is at mainline retailers, like $70 Australian, which is the equivalent of about $50 American. And then it went all the way up to 100 Australian dollars at our bigger, like eBay games, which is about 75 US dollars. So just like, yeah, Australia's a bit wild with how sort of all over the place it is in terms of the cost. But, I think the strategy here, just to kind of cap it off from a Call of Duty perspective, I haven't heard much backlash about this whole $10 fee, basically, to unlock the next gen version of it. And I think that was a huge mistake still from 505 around Control. Because that game also, you need people to be supporters of that game to grow it even further. But this has now made people like haters of that game. Unfortunately, it's really unfortunate because it's not even Remedy's fault in terms of what the publisher's doing in that space.
Yeah, they had the added difficulty of how to handle the DLC situation, but clearly it wasn't handled well. We talked about that at length.
Yeah, I know, but yeah, and I actually, because there was some stuff that came out after we had that discussion. Some of the stuff that they were saying and how it works, it's just BS, and it actually, I don't know. I'm all, again, I'm more of a business person, so sometimes it is what it is, and they want to get more money, and that's what it is. But don't say things that are just untrue. Like, there's literally things that they've said that I'm like, that's just not true, what you're saying. Like, they were saying basically the store doesn't allow it. Now, yeah, I'm sure probably Sony and Microsoft spoke to them offline about that, because that's, you've got to be really careful that they're trying to confirm things that haven't even been public yet. And just to wrap it up from me, at least, on Cold War, I actually really like the whole Reagan thing and the setting and how it's all structured. This had terrible reception. In terms of, especially Reagan. Did you have that kind of reaction of like going, oh yeah, cool, or were you just like meh, or were you like, oh, this is a war crime, this is terrible?
Oh, it definitely wasn't the latter. I was probably honestly a bit meh. Okay. I'm not. These games aren't for me. I'll say that. I haven't really played any. I played a bit of World at War and some of the very early Call of Duties, but the one I played the most was Modern Warfare 1. On the 360. So I'm definitely interested to see where the series goes year to year, but I'm much more, when it comes to multiplayer, much more of a Battlefield person in that regard. But I thought it was fine. I think it grounds the setting when you actually have historical figures. I don't know the whole ethics of, and like how likeness works, because I know when someone's a political figure in the US, how you can use their likeness is very different from, let's say a typical celebrity. But other than that, I was like, yeah, fine. No problem with me.
Yeah, same. And then moving on to probably the second biggest announcement from our perspective.
Well, it wasn't a new announcement.
Wow. Yeah.
The second biggest game.
It's a world premiere.
Yeah. So Dragon Age 4 was announced a few years ago, and they've only given us fleeting updates since then. Gave us the most substantial update during opening night live, but only generally just showing us concept and development footage. So the one thing that I'm a huge fan of the Dragon Age games, especially number 1, and actually quite fond of number 2 as well. The one thing I really hope from Dragon Age 4 is that they take what worked from Inquisition and kind of fine tune it a lot, because when it came to the map design and how you handled quests in that game, it was taking it from a fairly linear map design to very open worldy. Kind of lost a lot of the charm of it, but I still love the story and the characters, and it had with already known that it was going to continue at least something to do with Solus, and it was good. It seems like he's going to be the primary, I guess, antagonist of this game. And I believe it's going to be set in, and I know none of this means anything to you, into God, but I'm going to say it anyway. I believe I've read somewhere that it seems the game's going to be set in Tevinter, which is a huge part of the lore, but hasn't actually been really explored in the games yet. And that's really interesting because a lot of the games have, especially in Dragon Age 2, focused on magic users or mages versus non-magic users, and in number 2 is the Templars. And the world, this land that apparently it's going to be set in, is where a lot of those magic users are from, or at least they're free there. So I think it's a really interesting setting, and I'm pumped for it. I just don't know if it was. I don't know if it was the time to show anything yet, because they just didn't have anything to show.
Yeah.
And for someone that loves the series and is into the series, I think this was great. For new people and people that have not had any exposure to Dragon Age before, this isn't going to get them pumped, because concept footage and some very early development footage, like no textures and things, isn't going to excite anyone who isn't into Dragon Age already.
And it's really interesting time for BioWare, because really, Dragon Age ties together with, Dragon Age 3 back in 2014.
Inquisition.
Yeah, Inquisition. It's sort of like the last game that was well regarded from the studio, and it's just been, whether people like the games or not, mishaps and expectations setting incorrectly, and it's just been a real struggle for the studio. And, I haven't played a lot of BioWare games, but I've always sort of seen BioWare and gone, okay, like that's like a gold standard AAA, S tier kind of studio. You know what I mean? And like in my head, it's always been like, that's an S tier studio. Okay, anything that they're going to make, it's worthwhile to understand, get on top of, play. And they've kind of lost that. They're definitely not S tier anymore. You can't argue that. But I think they're in a spot of bother, to be honest.
Yeah, this is a very important game for them. I think they will, unless they screw the pooch on it. I think if the whole rumored Mass Effect remaster trilogy, as long as they don't screw that up, they may not even have anything to do with it. But it would still probably go a long way to get people back into the good books with them. But yeah, I've only played Anthem for a few hours. That game is, technically solid, looks great, but just has no magic to it, has no charm to it. And with Andromeda, I played that game at least a year and a half after it first came out, so I was very lucky to not have to deal with a lot of the technical problems that that game struggled with. And I actually ended up quite liking Andromeda, but I completely understand why people don't like that game.
And that could be expectations, right? Like, they sort of, if you played it when it first came out and you had certain expectations, it could kind of go a bit awry, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's a shame because that game had a very unfinished story and will very, very much probably never see the continuation and them wrapping up some huge loose ends in the Andromeda story, because people aren't interested in an Andromeda sequel. They're interested potentially in a new Mass Effect game eventually, but not in Andromeda 2 or a continuation of that story. So that is a shame. But Dragon Age 4, very important. I'm really keen to see how the game plays. Like that sounds obvious, but it's each of the Dragon Age games has played incredibly different in terms of how the combat works. With Inquisition, it was almost a mix of the first two. This one looks almost closer to, like, the perspective in that development footage was closer to a Dark Souls, and when it was very much over the shoulder kind of thing. So they may be taking it in a different direction again. So we'll see what they. Hopefully they've got some gameplay to show us. Probably this time next year, I'd say.
Yeah, and probably, well, not probably. Like, this game has been restarted, so like this game is years and years away. Like, this might be a mid-cycle next-gen game, but before that, certainly Anthem, they're rebooting that kind of. Like, I don't know how they've framed it, but they're basically, taking it all apart and putting it back together again. So I mean, if they do that well, and it has a bit of a No Man's Sky type of narrative around how they turn that around, maybe that will sort of set a pretty good scene for the new Dragon Age game to come out. I don't know. It's just interesting how studios can fall from grace so quickly. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Rareware to some degree. You know what I mean? Where it's just they were so bulletproof, and then with their Microsoft acquisition, for me, just have no interest in their games that are coming out.
Yeah, and as I said, I think the Mass Effect trilogy would, as long as it's handled decently, I think that will help. It will do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that's just like a no-brainer. Imagine if that came on the Switch. Like, that would just sell like gangbusters. Because I feel like there's a lot of people that have jumped on the Switch that may not have really been into gaming for a long time. Like, I hear that from a lot of people, anecdotally. So, yeah, it'd be really interesting. Like, how I feel like that game could be like the best seller in December if it was released this year for the holidays. Especially if it's like a bundle of all three games.
Well, there's not that many other games around that time, so I think it'll have a good chance.
Yeah, well, and, Call of Duty obviously is going to be the biggest
Oh yeah,
seller in
yeah,
that
yeah.
period of time. And being the launch of the next consoles, it's always an interesting time for game sales. Like, they never do as well, obviously, because it's not the install base. But and also you won't even be able to get that many people, as we'll sort of allude to later in the show, onto the new consoles in the first place. But yeah, I feel like Mass Effect. Surely it's like, because they're not Nintendo. Nintendo, I look at it and I go, why wouldn't they do Metroid Prime trilogy on the Switch? Like, that's just like, it won't sell crazy numbers because Metroid never does. But it just feels like something that would just really hit it home to a lot of people, and they just won't do it because they're Nintendo. And as I say that, they'll probably announce it next week, which I'll be happy to be wrong about. But whereas like EA, like, they want to make money, like, obviously, and Mass Effect trilogy would make a lot of money. So I know it's been rumored to be in development and sort of maybe even near final. So I actually really hope it will come out because it'd be a good way to play it if it's a good port or even remaster. And there were a lot of announcements, obviously, in Gamescom opening night. I can't even remember how many they said that they had mentions, like over 30 games or something like that, if you can include the pre-show. But we've just probably called out some of the ones that we thought were interesting. And I wanted to call out this trailer, and I don't know how to allude to this. It's basically, there's a guy and, he's running away from something. It's very sort of muted colors, green, browns, and then you start to realize, okay, there's like zombies or something. It's a bit like Walking Dead. And then it's Bridge Constructor, the Walking Dead edition. And I just wanted to point this out because I just thought this is such a weird, like, IP to be attached to Bridge Constructor. And then they've had what? Am I right to say that they've also had Portal?
Yeah,
Bridge Constructor?
yeah, they have. Yeah.
Please explain. I don't understand this.
Look, Walking Dead is definitely a weird
You reckon?
thematic kind of link to it, and I will say I've never seen The Walking Dead, but I know you have.
Yeah, I've seen almost all of it, and bridges aren't like a primary thing in The Walking Dead.
No, but I think the concept of having to like combine a zombie apocalypse with building bridges, I think is actually fine. Like, that's actually not a bad idea. I just don't know if The Walking Dead was the right property to do with, but obviously it gets attention. So, yeah.
It does. It does. No,
We're talking about it. We probably wouldn't have talked about Bridge Constructor otherwise.
It was a good trailer. I always love a good trailer. I feel like if there's anything in the industry that they're doing really, really well, it's generally the trailers. Like, and that's kind of almost, what one of the disappointments around Halo Infinite, where the trailer just didn't blow people away at all. Right, so... And you wanted to talk about some other games?
Yeah, so Teardown is a cool... I don't even know if to call it a game at the moment. I mean, technically it is, but...
It's a sandbox, voxel kind of Minecraft-y.
So basically, it's been... For a while, the developer's been working on, I guess, this engine that is very much, as you said, kind of a bit more detailed than, let's say, you standard Minecraft, but very much built on completely destructible environments, so like Red
Yeah.
Faction and Battlefield style and things, but a lot more so. But what's interesting about this is that, like, that's a cool concept, but the whole point apparently of this game is to destroy the surroundings so that then you can do runs through them. To then set you up to hit all these. This is probably just one mode, I imagine, but to hit different switches, essentially on a path, and then you like escape on a boat or something.
Yeah.
And that's interesting, but it just seems like this would be the, like you could do so many more things with this cool engine, and hopefully that's where it's going to go. But I just thought the engine itself looked great, and the trailer wasn't bad, but that as an actual game just seemed a little underwhelming. So cool tech, just the game itself I hope is a bit more interesting than just hitting switches.
Yeah, I just don't. It seems so strange. And,
Yeah.
sometimes these things are, it's the company behind it or the people or the creatives. But to me, it's like so odd that it feels like they've created this incredible engine and very unique, really. Because you're right. Like, I've watched a few videos and gameplay footage of it. It's something that you've never really seen before. It's like everything is destructible. And then they've sort of got this thing where they're like, oh, and it's a heist game. And it's like, what? Like,
Yeah.
I don't, like, you know what I mean? It's like they've taken something with, here's a palette. We've got every color out there. And here's the painting, and you have to paint blue. And it's just like, what? Why are you making me do this? Doesn't make sense to me. And I feel like, it's in early access. I'm sure they'll get feedback from people. And if they're smart, they'll react to what people are doing. And to me, this seems more like a Gary's mod or just a Minecraft or something like that. You know what I mean? Where you should be able to do whatever you want in it. And I don't know why they're pushing it to be like a heist sandbox.
There could be a huge modding community behind it.
Yeah.
And I like that's where I think the magic of that game or that engine will shine. And I mean, there've been attempts at this before, and there's probably some indie stuff out there in Steam that is similar, but maybe doesn't have there's no recognition out there at the moment. But this is the one that I think people have had eyes on for a while. This engine, so
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And both of these games, so Bridge Constructor and Teardown, are coming out this year.
So the next one I was super keen on, but simultaneously awesome, but confused by was Turrican. So I love Super Turrican. I haven't played the original Turrican games, let's say on Amiga and whatnot, but those games put Factor 5 on the map, and they went on to work on the Rogue Squadron games and Lair, which is an unfortunate, probably. I don't know if we brought out Factor 5 in a previous episode, but they obviously went the way of the dodo. But the thing with this is they started talking about Turrican. Oh, how much influential it was on a whole bunch of developers, even though it is still a very cult game. A lot of people don't think of, when you say, oh, what are classic action games? People think Contra and stuff. They don't generally think Turrican. But they didn't actually announce anything in this whole thing. So they're showing all the footage, and you had one Japanese developer mention something about a collection. And it's like, okay, so is it a collection? Is it a remaster? What is it? They didn't actually say in this whole thing. Now, I see that you've gone and found that we Strictly Limited are doing a Turrican collection of the actual original carts and things. But that's not like a collection that's most people are going to be interested in because they have to have those systems to play them.
Oh, no. I think they have it on the Switch as well, but I think it's like 2 versions of it. It's really confusing.
Okay. So
and
there
I
is
think
an
people are
actual
getting quite
digital
annoyed
one.
with it. Yeah, but I think there's 2 collections. So
Okay.
there's one which has Turrican, Turrican 2, Super Turrican Director's Cut, and Mega Turrican Score Attack. And then the rest of the Turrican games, like Turrican 3, Mega Turrican Director's Cut, Super Turrican 2, and Super Turrican 1 Score Attack, are on a different anthology. It's 2 volumes, and you have to buy both of them if you want all the games.
So are they? So they're coming
It's
out
on
as
Switch and PS4.
Oh, okay, good. Well, why didn't
Yeah.
they say there's a Turrican collection in this
It's
bloody thing?
confused. Everyone's really confused, actually.
Like,
It's
that's what I was
confusing.
saying. I was like pumped because I'm like, that's cool. Like, I loved Super Turrican, right? But
Well, can I just say about Super Turrican? I actually own Super Turrican because it's inbuilt in analog Super NT.
Oh, that's cool.
That's my way of throwing analog into this episode as
Oh,
well.
God. Um, so that was probably the weirdest thing in this whole show to me. It felt
Yeah.
so out of place. I loved hearing anything about Turrican because I can't even remember when the last Turrican game came out, but surely it was in the 90s. But
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah, I'm probably going to get corrected on that if there was some like WiiWare Turrican game or something. Um, but yeah, to not say anything about it, like I'd love to play a remaster or at least a collection. So the fact that there is a collection, I think, is cool because I've been having a lot of fun playing the Konami, Contra, and the Castlevania collections. So yeah, but I guess they also showed some other games which were previously announced, but they had extra, I guess, new footage of them and they gave more detail to. First was Star Wars Squadrons. So that's the essentially. I'd, I know it's not technically, but I'm treating it as a spiritual successor to Rogue Squadron
Oh
games.
yeah. Definitely. Definitely. I mean,
And
squadrons, like literally
yeah, so
squadrons.
I think that's definitely what they're aiming for in a way, which is coming to PC, PS4, Xbox One
What? Why did I
on
think this was a
October.
free to play game? Why did I think this was a free to play game?
I have no idea because I had never had that impression about this game.
But it
But
isn't a. It isn't like in the US. It's not a $60 game. I think it's coming out as like a $40 game.
I love the look of this. Anything that's kind of that is going back to that Rogue Squadron style interests
Oh
me.
yeah.
You know
Same.
that there will be escort missions and things, and those are sometimes very very hit and miss, more so miss than hit. But yeah, this is obviously not obviously. This is excited me the most of any Star Wars game in a very long time. So
Same. Yeah. No. Same. And I've gone blank. What was the game that came out? Do you remember the game that came out last year? The Star Wars game.
Jedi Fallen Order.
Yes, Jedi Fallen. That seemed interesting. I was actually keeping my eye on when that goes on sale because I don't know, that looked kind of cool. And I am a sucker for Star Wars. Like I will like the games more than they should be liked. So it feels like out of a 5 point rating scale, it'll bump it up like half a point just because it's the Star Wars IP. And this
Yeah,
Squadron game looks really cool. I like it.
yeah, and with Fallen Order, I'm actually interested in playing that. I just haven't got around to it yet. As a Dark Souls and Metroid fan, it seems like a kind of a blend of those two games in many ways. So
Yeah,
with obviously Star Wars.
yeah.
So another game that we hadn't heard of in a while, but one that was a huge hit a couple of years ago in Xbox's E3 conference was 12 Minutes.
Mm.
So this is the time loop game, and they announced that there has some star-studded voice cast of Willem Dafoe, Daisy Ridley, and oh my god, I can't remember the last one. Do you remember what the last actor was?
James McAvoy,
James
is that right?
McAvoy. That's
Look at
right.
that. That's just from my memory. Bang.
Well done, well done. Um, and this game seems cool.
Mm.
I don't know if it's a game I'm going to run out and get, but on day dot. But I'm interested to see what it turns out like.
Yeah, and look, these games are super important because, at least for me, 10 years ago, it felt like every game was very similar. And I'm so glad that there's just so many indie games, but then there's also games that just present you with a different experience. It's still a game, but it's not your, kind of almost cookie cutter now, open world, you like your favorite series, Assassin's Creed. You know what I mean? It's sort of like it is a different sort of look at something. And I know you probably didn't see it, but for me, it felt like it had some really strong aesthetics and homage to 12 Angry Men, which is one of my favorite films of all time. And yeah, like it's a game that it's one of those ones for me. I'm not like dying to go get it, but if it's on sale, I'm not expecting it to be a super long game. Feels like it would be like a 3-hour game. I might be totally wrong with that. But it's, one of those games you can play for a week and really enjoy it. And you kind of need those games, I think.
Yeah, I put it, I guess, in the category of something like Inside, where
Yeah.
it's not going to be a long game, but it's a very tailored experience. And in saying that, it does seem like your choices will potentially matter in this game. But we haven't probably. I don't know if we've seen any gameplay demos from memory. I know this game before it was announced, before it was showcased at E3 and Xbox conference, had been shown at PAXs for years before. I think it's been in development since 2015. So there may have been, they may have been showing off gameplay back then, but
Yeah.
on the big stage in these big presentations, haven't sat there with someone actually going through it. It's always been very
Scripted and
almost like a movie trailer in some ways.
yeah. Yeah.
And probably the last game that I want to make mention of is surprisingly actually Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga. So I actually love the Lego Star Wars games. So
Yeah, you're a huge fan, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say huge. I was a
Or
fan.
have you played most of them?
So I've played a lot of the Lego games probably up until the end of, let's say, the 360 era. I hadn't
Okay.
played, let's say, in the Harry Potter ones and some of the later Batman and Marvel ones and things like that. But the first couple of Lego Star Wars games I loved, the one where it combined them all. I spent the time, got all the achievements in it, spent so long in that game. And I haven't played, I hadn't played any Lego Star Wars games since number 3, which was actually not too bad. But this one's really interesting to me because I'm not sure about the most recent Lego games, but this one seems like the perspective is quite different. It's not so much the top-down
Yeah.
style as much. It seems like it's, it could have just been like for effect in the trailer, but it seemed like it is very much, it's much more over the shoulder and almost like a third-person game as opposed to isometric and things like that. So, yeah, I'm keen to actually see this how this turns out because it's covering the entire saga, and I love seeing how they throughout, going back to my first Star Wars game, Super Star Wars on the SNES. I love seeing how they adapt those classic scenes into the games in different ways. So.
Yeah, and I think this one's especially cool because now, and by the way, so Disney have said, okay, this is the end of the Star Wars saga. It's done. There's no way it's the end of the Star Wars saga.
No.
They're gonna have another. They're gonna have episode 10, and it's gonna be about Skywalkers. But like this game looks really cool. I really like it. I'm really digging it. And the Lego games, there was a bunch of them for free on Epic Game Store, so I went and played a bit of them, and they're really, really cool. I really like them. And
yeah, I'd say
they're kind of a bit cookie cutter, right? Like it's almost like the same thing over and over again with different IPs, but it's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, I quite liked the Indiana Jones ones and the Pirates of the Caribbean one. They were really fun. Yeah, I think they're great games just to kind of just sit down and chill out and play through them. Not very difficult if you're just looking for a different experience, and they're generally pretty fun co-op. I don't know if this game is co-op, but they're good if you've got significant others or kids to play with as well. So
yeah. And just to wrap it up, like two things that jumped out at me. One that made me laugh was in the vein of the whole bridge constructor, The Walking Dead, the whole Sims expansions, and there's so many expansions to the Sims 4, but this Star Wars expansion, I don't even know how to say this name, Journey to Batuu expansion,
yes.
And it's coming out on the 8th of September. It I don't know, it just seems so weird to me, like it's a mishmash.
I believe, isn't it based on the Disney World Star Wars world part? I think it's actually based on that. From memory.
Interesting.
I'm just looking it up. I don't want to get corrected on this.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought it was funny and it looked, odd to me. And it just made me think, when are they going to release The Sims on Switch? Because that just seems like the perfect home for The Sims.
Yeah, I'm surprised I haven't already. I've just looked it up. I think some people have said that they think it's based on Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, which is the world.
Yeah, which is the whole
I don't know that for certain. That's just something that I've heard. So
yeah, which I believe they closed down actually with the whole COVID stuff, which is disappointing. I do want to actually check it out one day, but that might be about 4 years away. And just to wrap it up, like Gamescom, what do you think of it? Did it sort of meet your expectations or what you thought it was all going to be?
It definitely didn't meet my expectations.
Yeah.
They, unlike some recent shows where they've tried to temper expectations. They hype this thing up as like, this is huge. You're going to hear so much
Yeah.
stuff. They did kind of say, I think Geoff Keighley, I don't know if it was how public it was or it was just tweeted out, said that a lot of it's going to be games we know about. But it's, as I kind of went through it, like my initial reactions were quite disappointing because I was, I they didn't say it was going to be, but I want to hear stuff about Elden Ring and things like that. But it's, but like there were some cool things, but I think the expectations were set too high for this.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. And I think, you know, you don't know what you've got until it's gone, right? And there is something about having the crowds there. They give a certain flavor and just content almost to these kind of events. And not having any crowds reacting, I don't know, something about it. It's the same as sport. Like sport doesn't feel the same without crowds.
Sheesh, could you imagine they have like that Turrican bit playing to a live E3 crowd?
But I kind of love the cringe. That's what I miss the most of those events. Like Blizzard's event, and everyone's booing the Diablo game, right, on mobile, and and then they're just like on the stage, and I've had moments like that presenting to big, groups of people, and they've just gone wrong, which is just go against the audience. It's like, don't you have mobiles? It's just like, oh no, dude, you've lost the crowd now. Yeah, just they built this up, and it makes me worried about probably the last event for the year, which is the Games Award, which is kind of becoming almost like, from a streamed perspective, to me, the biggest event, like single event for the year. Like, Geoff Keighley's done a really great job at building that brand up, but I don't know, man. It was, to me, pretty rough, this whole Gamescom thing. Like, I had it in the diary, for God's sakes. And, I don't know, when I started watching the VOD, I was just like, oh, man, this is like, it's just not, it just drags on, And I think there is something about the crowd,
If I'd woken up and watched this whole thing at 3 a.m., I would have been so pissed.
Yeah, same. Yeah, no, same.